Welcome back to the channel. Today I've brought important questions from the chapter Silk Road, class 11. Let's get started with the question answers. I have 28 important questions for you. Now, if you have watched this video, then question answers will be a cakewalk for you. So now, the first question. If you haven't watched this video, link is in the description box. Go and watch the video, then come back to question and answers. The first one. Where was the narrator heading from Rabu? What farewell present did Lamo give to the narrator? So narrator कहाँ जा रहा था? माउंट कैलाश जा रहा था अपना कोरा कंप्लीट करने के लिए और लामो जो है वो उसे एक शीप स्किन कोट लॉन्ग स्लीव शीप स्किन कोट देती है जो कि वहां के सब मेन जो है वो पहनते हैं. So quickly let's read the answer. The narrator was heading to Mount Kailash to complete the Kora. One evening through Daniel, the narrator had told Lamo that he was going to Mount Kailash. Lamo advised him to take some warmer clothes there. When the narrator was ready to move from Rabu, Lamo brought a long-sleeved sheepskin coat that all men wore to protect themselves from the intense cold. She gifted that coat to the narrator. Question number 2. Why did they take a shortcut and what was the problem with it? So season suggests कि हम एक शॉर्टकट लेते हैं ताकि हम चैंग टैंग को अवॉइड कर सकें और सीजन ये भी बताता है कि वो शॉर्टकट जो है अदरवाइज वहां पे कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगी ओनली इफ दे डिड नॉट गेट स्नो देयर और स्नो वहां होगी या नहीं होगी इसके क्या चांसेस है वो कोई नहीं कह सकता. So they took a shortcut to avoid going to Changtang. Season, who was driving the narrator to Mount Kailash for completing his Kora, knew a route that would take them southwest almost directly towards Mount Kailash. The shortcut involved crossing several fairly high mountain passes. The problem would arise only in the case of snow on this route, and one could not be sure about the snow until one reached there. Now, question number 3. What did the author see on his way after they took a shorter route? Now, after they take a shorter route, तो उसे रास्ते में सबसे पहले gazelles नजर आते हैं, then a herd of white ass, then shepherds, also called as Drokpas in their language, and nomads and Tibetan mastiffs. So you have to write about this. So on the shorter route, the author passed vast open plains with nothing in them except a few gazelles. As they moved further, the plains became more stony than grassy, and they were welcomed by a herd of galloping asses. Then, as the hills became steeper, they passed a few Drokpas tending their flocks. Sometimes men and women would wave at the car of the author. There he also saw the dark, isolated tents of the nomads guarded by huge black Tibetan mastiffs. Now, this is in short if it is a 2 marks question. If detailed is asked, then you can write about the details. I have dealt with the details in further questions. Question number 4. At what height did the narrator have a headache? What did he do to treat it? Now, this was the first sign of uneasiness that he had as he was moving up. So, at the height of 5,400 meters, the narrator's head began to throb horribly. He took gulps of water from his bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid, steep uphill journey. After a while, as they drove down the other side of the pass, the narrator's headache cleared. So जब ऊपर जा रहे थे तो एकदम से उसका जो हेड है वो थ्रॉप करने लग गया तो उसने फटाफट पानी जो है वो स्वैलो किया और लेकिन जब वो पास की दूसरी साइड से नीचे उतरने लगे then after some time उसका हेडेक जो है वो ठीक हो गया. So the headache was because of the altitude. Now question number 5. How had the author described Tibetan mastiffs or described the guard instinct of the Tibetan mastiffs as told by the author? So ये Tibetan mastiffs का detail है. The author had described the Tibetan mastiffs as huge shaggy monsters blacker than the darkest night. They usually wore bright red collars and barked furiously with massive jaws. According to the author, when these dogs became aware of the approaching car, they fixed their sight on it. Then, as the car drew closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards it like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. They were completely fearless of the car and chased it for 100 meters or so, easing off only after seeing them out of their property. It was because of this fearless instinct that the ferocious Tibetan mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. So these dogs, they are very ferocious and fearless. Question number 6 now. How did Season cross the first patch of snow that they came across? So this is the first hurdle. So Season ने उसे कैसे पार किया? So Season एकदम से कार से बाहर आ जाता है and then he stamps on the snow. वो चेक करने के लिए कि स्नो कितनी गहरी है, पर गहराई जो है स्नो की that wasn't the problem. प्रॉब्लम थी the slippery icy top layer. So उसे टैकल करने के लिए सीजन क्या करता है? So let's read it. Now Season suddenly stopped at a tight bend and jumped out of the car. Daniel and the narrator, they also jumped out of the car because there was a stretch of about 15 meters of snow in front of them. ये वो जो शॉर्टकट लेते हैं वहां आगे उनको ये स्ट्रेच मिलता है. The slope was too steep for their car to scale. Season stepped onto the snow, stamping his foot on the snow to check how sturdy it was. The snow wasn't too deep, but the danger was not its depth, but its icy and slippery cold air. If they slipped from there, their car could turn over. To tackle this, Season grabbed handfuls of dirt and flung them across the frozen surface. So उसने मुट्ठी भर के मिट्टी उठाई और surface के ऊपर फेंक दी. So जो upper layer थी, slippery layer, वो मिट्टी के साथ मिल गई और उसकी जो slipperiness थी वो कम हो गई. So Daniel and narrator, they also joined Season. When the snow was spread with soil, Season backed up the car and slowly drove across the patch without much difficulty. So उसके बाद जब उसने कार ऊपर से चलाई, so without much difficulty he was able to cross that. Question number 7. Describe the plateau where the narrator and his companions stopped for lunch. So वो एक रास्ते में lunch के लिए रुकते हैं. So उस plateau पे there is lot of activity, lot of hustle bustle. वहाँ पे कुछ लोग जो है बिकॉज सारे एरिया में सॉल्ट है, सो वो सॉल्ट गैदर कर रहे हैं, इकट्ठा कर रहे हैं और फिर ट्रक्स में भर रहे हैं और ट्रक्स जो है वो जा रहे हैं, कुछ ट्रक्स आ रहे हैं. सो लॉट ऑफ एक्टिविटी देयर. At 2 o'clock, the narrator and his companions stopped for lunch. They ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent. The plateau was covered with salt flats and brackish lakes. Brackish lakes matlab salty lakes. Remnants of Tethys Ocean. So these were remnants of Tethys Ocean. The place was brimming with activity. Men were busy with pickaxes and shovels, trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. All wore sunglasses against the glare of the sun. A steady stream of blue trucks carrying salt emerged from the blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. So, काफी activity थी उस plateau पे. Question number 8 now. Why was the narrator shocked on reaching Hor? अब नरेटर की शॉक की वजह थी the dirty condition of the town. So Hor was a small town on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. The narrator found Hor to be a grim and miserable place. There was no vegetation, just dust and rocks, liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse. So हर तरफ litter था. This was very unfortunate because the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Next question. What is the importance of Lake Mansarovar? Lake Mansarovar is Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Venerated means worshipped, sacred. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Mansarovar as a source of 4 great Indian rivers, the Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj, and the Brahmaputra. Actually, only the Satluj flows from the lake, but the headwaters of all the others rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. So, ये Lake Mansarovar की importance है. Now, question number 10. What did the cafe at Hor look like? The only cafe at Hor, like all other buildings in the town, was constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. So एक ही कैफे है हॉर में और उसकी भी बहुत बुरी हालत है. From one of the windows, the narrator had a good view of the lake. There he was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform. Now next, question number 11. How was the narrator's experience in Hor a stark contrast to the accounts he had read of the earlier travelers? So narrator ने earlier travelers जो Hor आए थे, so उनका account जो travelogue है उनका वो पढ़ा और उसमें Hor को describe किया था as a beautiful place, beautiful and pure place. और जो लेक मानसरोवर है उसकी सैंक्टिटी के बारे में बताया गया था. But when narrator reached there, so it was a stark contrast. Sorry. So let's read what contrast he talks about. The narrator had read about Ikai Kawaguchi, a Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900. He was so moved by the sanctity of Lake Mansarovar that he burst into tears. So uski sanctity, uski purity देख के उसके आंसू निकल गए. The narrator had also read about Wen Hedden, this is the second traveler, who reached there a couple of years later than the Japanese monk. The hallowed waters of the lake had a similar effect on Wen Hedden. So, hallowed means the holy waters. They also had a similar kind of effect on him, but the only difference was that he did not cry. A Swede who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. But the narrator did not feel anything like this. Hor was a grim and miserable place for him with rubbish scattered all around. So the picture that he saw was totally opposite. Question number 12. Describe the narrator's troubled night at Darchan. So Darchan जब वो पहुंचता है तो वो रात उसके लिए बहुत मुश्किल होती है. So he doesn't feel well that night. He's not able to lie down. उससे लेटा नहीं जाता. जैसे ही वो लेटने की कोशिश करता है, सोने की कोशिश करता है, वो एकदम से abruptly उठ जाता है because he is not able to breathe properly. The narrator reached Darchan at 10:30 p.m. and stopped at a guest house. Walking around in the open air at Hor had set off narrator's cold once again. On reaching Darjan, one of the narrator's nostrils was blocked again, and as he lay down to sleep, he wasn't sure if the other would provide him sufficient oxygen. So एक nostril उसकी पूरी block थी और जैसे ही वो सोने के लिए लेटा, he wasn't sure कि जो दूसरी nostril है उससे उसे पूरा oxygen मिलेगा कि नहीं. At Ravu also, he had been gasping for oxygen several times every night. He had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disturbances by now, but they still scared him. So ये जो disturbance थी अब तक उसे थोड़ी आदत हो गई थी, पर अभी भी he was scared because of all this. He started breathing through the single nostril and was about to sleep when he woke up abruptly again. His chest felt heavy and he sat up. He cleared his nasal passage and with that the heaviness in his chest was relieved. So जैसे उठ के बैठता था nasal passage clear करता था तो chest में जो heaviness है वो कम हो जाती थी, लेकिन जब फिर लेटता था उसकी sinuses फिर block हो जाती थी. So as the narrator tried to sleep again, the same thing happened. As soon as he tried to lie down, his sinuses filled and chest felt odd. He stayed upright against the wall the whole night but couldn't sleep. He got so scared that he felt that if he went to sleep, then he might never wake up again. So this was his troubled night. Question number 13 now. Why did the narrator visit Darchan Medical College? What did it look like and what was unusual about the doctor there? The night of the narrator at Darchan Medical College was the night of the narrator at the Darchan Medical College was difficult. Sorry, it should be at Darchan. So let me cut this. So night of the narrator at Darchan was difficult. It is not Darchan Medical College. So he was not able to breathe properly. His chest felt strangely heavy. He woke up abruptly from his sleep, sat up and cleared his nasal passages, which almost instantly relieved the heavy feeling in his chest. So again, he was not feeling good, and that is why the next day Season took him to Darchan Medical College. But something was wrong. As soon as he lay down, his sinuses filled and chest felt odd. He sat upright the whole night for the fear of never waking up again if he slept. Therefore, Season took him to the Darchan Medical College the next morning. Now, what did the college look like? So, Darchan Medical College, it was new and looked like a monastery from the outside with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. The consulting room was dark and cold. A Tibetan doctor was sitting there, but he was not wearing any of the paraphernalia that a doctor wore like a white coat. So doctor जो है उसने white coat नहीं पहना था because ठंड इतनी थी तो एक मोटी उसने pullover और एक woolly hat पहनी हुई थी. So he was wearing a thick pullover and a woolly hat like any other Tibetan. Now question number 14. What problem did they have with their car on the way? So रास्ते में उनकी कार के दो टायर्स जो है वो पंक्चर हो जाते हैं. So the narrator's car had suffered two punctures. in quick succession on their drive down from the salt lake, and Season was eager to have them fixed at horse since they left him with no spares. तो सीजन के पास और एक्स्ट्रा टायर्स नहीं थे, इसलिए सीजन चाहता था कि हॉर में वो पंक्चर्स जो है वो रिपेयर करा लिए जाएं. Besides, the second tire he had changed had been replaced by the one that was very smooth, and it was dangerous to drive on hills with a smooth tire. Now, question number 15. What did the doctor tell the narrator? The narrator's first night at Darchen was a troubled one. He was sleepless throughout the night and spent the whole night sitting up. The next morning, Season took him to the doctor at Darchen Medical College. The narrator explained to him his sleepless symptoms and that he was not able to lie down. So the doctor examined him and said that it was a cold and effects of altitude. The narrator asked him if he would be able to complete his Kora. So narrator was worried कि वो तो यहाँ Kora complete करने आया है तो वो क्या कर सकेगा कि नहीं. So the doctor told him not to worry and gave him medicine for 5 days, which he started right away. So उसी दिन से narrator ने medicine शुरू कर दी. Now next question number 16th. When and why did the narrator sleep like a log? So this can be asked in this way also. How does the narrator describe the medicine given to him by the Tibetan doctor? The Tibetan doctor gave the narrator medicine for 5 days, which he started right away. He was given 15 doses to be taken 3 times a day. The after breakfast package contained a brown powder which he had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. The contents of the lunchtime and bedtime packages were less obviously identifiable. So lunchtime और bedtime वाली जो पुड़िया थी, so उसमें जो भी था he was not able to identify क्योंकि जो breakfast वाली थी उसे लगता था कि it tasted like cinnamon. So both contained small spherical brown pellets. So छोटी छोटी brown गोलियां थी. So they looked suspiciously like sheep dung, but the narrator took them. He felt better after the first day's course only. Thus, on that night, that is, the day after the first course of 3 doses was complete, he slept very soundly, just like a log and not a dead man. Now, question number 18th. What did Season tell him after the narrator felt better? Once the narrator felt better at Darchen, Season got ready to leave for Lhasa. Before leaving, he told the narrator that as a Buddhist, it didn't matter if he had passed away. Everyone has to die one day. But what he thought was that it would have been bad for business. Now question 19. Describe the town of Darchen. अब Darchen जो है वो भी हॉर की तरह, it wasn't a nice place. It was again dirty and it was full of litter. Darchen was dusty and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. It looked neglected. The bright sun shining brilliantly in the sky gave some relief to the narrator. He could see the great Himalayas commanded by a huge snow-capped mountain, Gurla Mandata. The town had a couple of rudimentary general stores selling Chinese cigarettes, soap, and other basic provisions, as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. In front of one, men were playing an afternoon game of pool in the open air, while nearby women washed their long hair in the icy water of a narrow brook that babbled down past the guest house of the narrator. To the narrator, Darchen felt relaxed and unhurried. Now, question number 20th. What drawback did the narrator come across at Darchen and what were his options? So, Darchen में क्या ऐसा एक drawback जो है वो मिला narrator को? Drawback ये था that नरेटर जो है वो वहाँ कुछ जल्दी पहुँच गया था, अभी पिलग्रिम्स वहाँ पहुँचे नहीं थे. सो डार्चन जो है वहाँ पे वो एक्टिविटी वो हसल बसल नहीं थी और नरेटर ने वो पिलग्रिम्स के ग्रुप के साथ आगे जाना था माउंट कैलाश अपना कोरा कंप्लीट करने के लिए. Now Darchen seemed to be relaxed and unhurried place for the narrator. He was told that at the height of the pilgrimage season, the town was bustling with visitors. Thus, the relaxed mood of Darchen was a drawback for him as he had planned his next part of the journey to Mount Kailash with the other pilgrims. The narrator had arrived there a bit too early. His options were limited. He had reached there after much effort and difficulty, so returning was out of question. So उसके पास कोई ज़्यादा options नहीं थी. इतनी मुश्किल से वो वहाँ तक पहुँचा था, तो अब वो वापस जाने का तो सवाल ही नहीं था. और दूसरा, वो आगे अकेला जा सकता था. जो सड़क थी वो वहाँ की वो अच्छी थी, but he could not imagine going there alone. Even though the pilgrimage trail was well trodden, he couldn't imagine going alone. So एक ही option थी उसके पास, that was to wait. So therefore his only option was to wait. Now question number 21. What did the narrator mean by clearly I hadn't made much progress with my self-help program on positive thinking? The night the narrator reached Darchen was a troubled one for him. The town itself had disappointed him. It was dusty and littered. Also, after season left, the narrator realized that he had reached Darchen a bit too early. The pilgrims had not yet reached there. Situation looked bleak to him as he didn't want to return after overcoming all the obstacles in his way. He didn't even want to go ahead alone. All sorts of negative thoughts were coming to his mind. Therefore, he felt that his self-help program on positive thinking hadn't made much progress. So, उसके दिमाग में उस टाइम पे सारी नेगेटिव बातें आ रही थी. सीजन जो है वो जा चुका था और आस-पास उसे कोई भी ऐसा नहीं मिला जो इंग्लिश में उससे बात कर सके. So he was feeling lonely and all kinds of negative thoughts coming to his mind. Therefore, he felt कि जो उसका positive थिंकिंग वाला प्रोग्राम है सेल्फ हेल्प प्रोग्राम वो काम नहीं कर रहा. Now 22. Who was Norbo? Describe his meeting with Norbo. So this is describe the narrator's meeting with Norbo. Norbo was a Tibetan, but he worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Science and the Institute of Ethnic Literature. He was also there to do his Kora. He had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Kora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years, but he had never actually done it himself. The narrator was sitting in a cafe by the only window there. He had brought a novel with him to pass his time. When Norbu entered the cafe, he saw the book of the narrator and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite to him. When Norbu came to know that the narrator was English, so both of them started talking. So this was their first meeting. Now question number 23. What did the narrator feel about Norbu? Norbu didn't look like the locals to the narrator because he was wearing a wind chitter and metal-rimmed spectacles of a Western style. He was Tibetan but worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and the Institute of Ethnic Literature. The narrator had assumed that he was on some sort of field work. Now question number 24. Compare the cafe at Hor and Darchen. So this is important question. Hor and Darchen had only one cafe, but the cafes, they were in a dilapidated condition. They were not at all hygienic and presented a grim picture. So दोनों जगह के cafe जो है वो एकदम से गंदे थे, बिल्कुल hygienic नहीं थे और furniture and everything it was in bad shape. The cafe at Hor was constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. As the narrator sat inside, he felt uncomfortable because of the cold air coming inside. अब तीनों खिड़कियां टूटी थी तो बाहर से ठंडी हवा आ रही थी. So it was only the good view of the lake from one of the windows that gave him some relief. He was served there by a Chinese youth in military uniform. The furniture was in a bad condition and the table was cleaned by a filthy rag. Next, the cafe at Darchen was small, dark, and cavernous, with a long metal stove that ran down the middle. The walls and the ceiling were wreathed in sheets of multicolored plastic of striped variety, broad blue, red, and white. The cafe had a single window beside which the narrator sat to see the pages of his notebook. The table was rickety, like the poor condition of the furniture at the cafe in Hor. So, दोनों ही जो कैफे हैं उनकी हालत जो है बहुत खराब थी. So here actually it was cleaned with a filthy rag and not a by filthy rag. So make it with here. So sorry for this mistake. Now let's move on to the next question. Question number 25. So question number 25 is both Norbu and the narrator, they were excited to meet each other. Why? Both Norbu and the narrator, they were on their way to complete their Kora, but both of them had reached Darchen early. So when they met each other in Darchen's only cafe, they were excited as they realized that their destination was the same. So it meant that they could team up and it would be easier for them to complete their quota. So इसलिए दोनों जो है उनको बहुत खुशी होती है एक दूसरे को मिलके. Question number 26. Why was the narrator's excitement on meeting Norbu short-lived? अब उनको खुशी होती है आपस में मिलके, लेकिन नरेटर की जो एक्साइटमेंट है वो थोड़ी कम हो जाती है कुछ देर के बाद. So what is the reason? The narrator's excitement on meeting Norbu was short-lived because during his conversation with Norbu, he realized that Norbu was as ill-equipped for the Kora as he was. He had initially decided to complete his Kora with other pilgrims, but since they hadn't reached Darjan yet, he was weighing his possibilities with Norbu. So उसे लगता है कि Norbu के पास भी वो proper सामान नहीं है जो उसके पास भी नहीं था कोरा complete करने के लिए. So वो थोड़ी सोच में पड़ जाता है. Now question number 27. Where did the narrator come across a herd of wild ass and what were they doing? As the narrator moved from Rabu towards Mount Kailash, he came across a great herd of wild ass, where the plains became more stony than grassy. Season told the narrator beforehand that they were approaching Kayang, that is Tibetan wild ass. So season पहले ही बता देता है कि आगे Kayang मिलने वाले हैं. So pointing at the thick cloud of dust that they could see ahead. So उसे वहाँ पे thick cloud of dust आके नजर आता है, जिसे देख के वो बता देता है कि आगे wild ass हैं. When they drew near, they saw the herd galloping, wheeling and turning in tight formation, as if they were practicing maneuvers on some predetermined course. Because of this, plumes of dust billowed into the crisp, clean air. Now, the last question described the Drokpas as seen by the narrator on his way. On his way to Mount Kailash from Ramu, the narrator saw solitary Drokpas tending their flocks. Both men and women, well wrapped in warm clothes, would pause and stare at their car and occasionally waved at them. When the car came closer to their animals, dodging the car, the sheep would suddenly change their direction to escape being hit. So this is the description of the Drokpas, and that's all for today. I hope that all the questions are clear. So just subscribe to the channel for other chapters and other important question answers. Check the playlist for more videos related to your syllabus. And do give a thumbs up to this video. Bye for now and happy preparation.